Ahoy Malloy Fantasy Football fanatics, welcome to the Week 9 episode of the ACME Real Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host D-Cypher, and we have a thrilling lineup for you today. From league standings to injury updates and everything in between, we're covering it all, and you won't want to miss our Game of the Week. Todd's Tough Mofos versus the Rump Rangers. Talk about a nail-biter. The score was razor thin, with Rump Rangers just edging out Todd Squad 28.8 to 28.1. Don't worry, we'll dive into the action later in the show. Stick around, this episode is gonna be a good one. But before we dive into the games, let's talk about what makes ACME Real Fantasy Football the most competitive fantasy league out there. With over 200 free agents available every week, we offer more flexibility than any other league. Injuries? No problem. Underperforming starters? You've got options. ACME's deep free agent pool ensures that you always have a chance to find a winning lineup. Now, let's jump into the standings after Week 9. Here's where the teams are sitting after some intense battles on the field. Coming in at number 1 are the Killers, dominating with 286.13 total points and averaging 31.79 points per game. They're leading the pack for a reason. Then comes Rump Rangers, coming off a huge win in our Game of the Week. They're right on the Killers' heels. Then coming in our number 3 spot is Todd's Tough Mofos, tied for the best record, but trailing in overall points with 269.16. Next we have the Ball Busters. They're clawing their way up with a solid performance. Then in the 5th place spot we got Lickety Splitters. It's kind of a roller coaster of a season, but they're still in the fight. Then TDs, middle of the pack but capable of pulling off a surprise. Then in the 7th place spot is Bod Squad, struggling but determined to turn things around. Then in the 8th place spot we have Sock Monkey, on a similar path but hoping for that one big break. Then in number 9 we have Bodily Harm, still competitive but just needs to find some consistency. Then after that is Joe Buck Yourself, sitting at the bottom tier just looking for a chance of redemption. And in number 11 is T-Money, a tough season so far but still showing some fight. And then rounding out our 12 is Illuminati, tough season this year but they're not giving up just yet. But speaking of people not giving up, let's talk about the injuries. Ah yes, the injuries, the bane of every fantasy manager's existence. Here's the latest from the Week 9 NFL's action. In Houston, Damon Pierce is out with a groin injury and Jared Patterson is dealing with a concussion. In New York, Allen Lazard and Elijah Vera Tucker are both out. Lazard is dealing with a chest injury while Vera Tucker's got an ankle issue. This is sure going to make things tough for the Jets. Don't worry, these players are going to be evaluated and we'll see if they're ready to go in Week 10. Heal up guys, your fantasy managers are counting on you. Now, let's dive into the first round of matchups for Week 9, and let me tell you folks, we had some tight games this week. Starting off, we had Lickety Splitters versus Bodily Harm. Lions defense really came through with 1 interception, 1 defensive touchdown, and 7 fantasy points. But joining our 0 points club are Zach Ertz, Nick Chubb, and Brian Thomas Jr. Come on guys, have a seat. Next up we had Bod Squad versus Ball Busters in a 27-30 loss. Looks like the Bears defense really was crushing it with 3 sacks, 2 fumbles, and 6 fantasy points. Then next we had Joe Buck Yourself take on Sock Monkey. Sock Monkey won by 2 points, 29-27. They used the Saints defense with 1 sack, 1 interception, and 7.5 fantasy points to secure that win. Next up, we had the Killers stomp out the TDs with a 10-point win, 34-24. We already know Killers out here murdering people this season, but Kenya, please chill. They had Saquon Barkley put up a monstrous performance, 159 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 7.3 fantasy points. Sheesh, Killers, relax. Then we had T-Money versus Illuminati. This was a tight one. This was 27-26. Illuminati wins. Kareem Hunt with 106 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, and 3.9 fantasy points helped with that solid lineup. This week saw a series of close games, but no games came as close as our Game of the Week. This episode of the ACME Real Fantasy Football Podcast is brought to you by, well, us. ACME Real Fantasy Football, where the thrill of the game is just 1 click away. Sign up today at ACME Real Fantasy Football and get in the game. And now for our game of the week. We have Todd's Tough Mofos taking on Rump Rangers in a nail-biter, with the final score tying down to 28.1 to 28.8 in favor of the Rump Rangers. The Bengals defense delivered 5 sacks, 2 fumbles, and 8.4 fantasy points. They came through big time for Rump Rangers, pushing them just over the edge for the win. What a game. This is what you can look forward to when you play ACME Real Fantasy Football. Close games like this. Now, let's take a look at the matchups for next week. Lickety Splitters take on T-Money. TDs will go up against the Rump Rangers. Killers versus Sock Monkey. Bod Squad, on a 2-win streak mind you, go up against Illuminati. Ballbusters, also on a 2-win streak, go up against Bodily Harm. And Todd's Tough Mofos take on Joe Buck Yourself. It's shaping up to be another action-packed week. Which of these teams will rise and which will fall? Only time will tell. And that wraps up week 9 of the ACME Real Fantasy Football podcast. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, keep your roster set, trade smart, and your lineups locked. I'm your host D-Cypher signing off until next time, folks. May the fantasy odds be ever in your favor.